Hello! Welcome to my channel. Today I have something very special for you. I have, well, let's see. Do you remember that really unhinged action movie, Shoot 'em Up? It's from a few years back. I remember seeing it in the theater with a bunch of friends from work, and we absolutely loved it. It's one of my favorite action movies because it is so completely unhinged. Anyway, today I've got the director of that movie, and he's here to talk about a movie that he's trying to get made, an animated heist movie called Blast 'em Up Sci-Fi. And before I bring him on, I'm going to go ahead and play his little video that will explain everything to you, so that you know what we're going to be talking about. So,
Blast 'em Up is a sci-fi follow-up to my film Shoot 'em Up, starring Clive Owen. Hi, I'm Michael Davis, writer-director of 7 feature films. I want to take the super clever gunplay that's in Shoot 'em Up and put the same cool, crazy, imaginative action into a futuristic world. There's one big problem getting Blast 'em Up made. Every studio I showed the script to shot me down. Even though many fans said
Shoot 'em Up is mankind's greatest achievement.
the film wasn't a hit, so there was no way anybody was going to give me the money to make a big sci-fi movie about a band of space thieves who attempt the greatest heist of their careers only to encounter aliens bent on destroying mankind. Because I love making action movies so much... Bring out! Then bam! Oh cool, he fried him! I decided to say, blast you, Hollywood. I'm gonna find a way to make it myself. I taught myself computer-generated animation. I created everything in the Blast 'em Up footage you've just seen, from animation, set, spaceship, and prop design, plus the lighting and camera work. I feel so empowered. Nobody can stop me from making a movie. Whatever fantastic idea I come up with, I can now put into an animated film. High-quality feature film animation can now be produced by a single animator. I hope Blast 'em Up is a revolution in feature film animation, because I'm going to teach others my process in hopes of inspiring future solo animation wizards to make their own CGI movies. I'll do this through detailed making-of videos, and I'll be appearing on several Movie Geek YouTuber shows to talk about the making of Blast 'em Up. These Movie Geek YouTubers are supporting the film. I'll be a guest on their shows where I'll also tell my funny and horrific stories about the film business. I am so grateful for their backing. I'm not crazy thinking I can animate a feature film all by myself. I just did it. I single-handedly drew a 2D animated feature, Nixed, that premiered at the world-renowned Annecy International Animation Film Festival. To make Blast 'em Up, I need your help, you animation, sci-fi, action-adventure fans. Most computer-generated features cost tens of millions of dollars, sometimes $100 million. I just need $80,000 to fund all the stuff I can't do myself. I need great voice actors, maybe even a star, and performers for motion capture shoots. Hard drive storage, CGI models, and mocap processing fees need to be covered, plus money for a composer and a professional soundtrack design. I am making a bunch of cool rewards for the support. You can even be a featured extra in the film. All backers will get to see Blast 'em Up at a virtual premiere, months before it shows on the popular streamers. Remember, if you can't contribute, you can still help by sharing the project on your social media. I really appreciate all the support and excitement for the project. Oh, I gotta get a deflector shield in here!
okay, so that's Blast 'em Up. And now I'm going to bring in Michael. And I got to tell you, before we started this live stream, I've been with him in the green room for like half an hour just chatting. This guy's great. You're going to love him. Also, apologies for my internet connection. There's a big storm outside, so I might be a little blurry. Sorry about that. Anyway, here's Michael.
Hey, everybody. Thanks
Hello,
for watching.
Michael.
And hey, Eric, thanks for having me here. I've been really excited. I had a blast talking to you in the green room. We were talking about James Bond, and I was talking about how I agreed with him with his Moonraker review. He He liked lots of it, but he thought that the villain was really super bland. I also will have to warn you. He said he describes shoot 'em up as unhinged. Well, I'm kind of unhinged too. I have a problem. My wife always yells at me because I'm so loud, and I equate loudness with passion. And so, if I look like a nut, you're not wrong. I am kind of a nut, and it kind of is a nut for somebody. I'm going to try to animate this Blast 'em Up all by myself. I animated that movie Nixed, which was hand drawn. I had a great time, and now I'm going to have a great time doing Blast 'em Up. And the thing that's so great about doing it in CGI is that I don't have to worry about a budget. There's no way a studio would let me make a gigantic movie like that, even though for a short time I was attached to a reboot of Outland, if anybody remembers that.
Really? I have a copy of Outland, like right over there.
Yeah, and again, I was disappointed in that because I was expecting, like, if the problem with Outland is that it's a remake of High Noon, right? And in High Noon, you get Gary Cooper and Grace Kelly. And then in the sci-fi one, you get Sean Connery and Frances Sternhagen. You know, she's the Grace Kelly character. I mean, who makes that decision? Which leads me, I mean, having been in Hollywood, it's just maddening the decisions that people make. And it's really frustrating. So I have all this freedom. Plus, if you've seen Shoot 'em Up, it has all the cool things you can do in a gunfight. You know, there's a gunfight in midair while he's rappelling. There's a gunfight where he's delivering a baby and he uses the gun to shoot the umbilical cord. He's making love to Monica Bellucci. The bad guys come in and he's shooting them up while he's still entwined inside Monica Bellucci. It is crazy. But now I can have spaceships and jetpacks and aliens and robots all within this great, you know, it's basically a spiritual follow-up to Shoot 'em Up, but it's, you know, it's not a sequel at all. And I was thinking about it today. The other thing I really like about Blast 'em Up is the hero obviously has a blaster, but he also likes these things from the past, from Earth's past. And he has a second weapon, which is an old Colt 45. And actually, he ends up having to use both the old bullets with the blaster to solve things. Like, I always had this idea if I ever did a Star Wars movie, you know, the lightsaber has all this energy in it, right? And I figured it has electrical energy. Well, you know how they say don't put your, you know, your fan or your radio while you're taking a bath because you would get electrocuted if the electronics falls in the water because water conducts electricity and energy. I always thought it'd be great if the Jedi was cornered and there were all these, you know, stormtroopers, and how is he going to get them? But somehow he gets it to flood with water, and he sticks the lightsaber in the water, and it conducts the energy, and they all get stunned and go down. Well, but of course, a lightsaber or a blaster, you can't, like, if there's a big canister of water, it's just going to make the little special effects spark. It's not going to make the water fall out. So in my movie, the guy's cornered. Charlie's the hero. He shoots with his old gun the bullets to burst the canister, so it's flooded with water. And then he shoots the blaster in the water, and it conducts the electricity, and this whole mass of guys go down. But I really like the idea of having the old with the new. And you can see that I just like watching movies that are fun, right? We were just talking about how much I hated the last Daniel Craig Bond movie because I walked out feeling really bad. I just like to make movies where people feel pumped up while they're watching and when they come out. But I also when I was animating this previous movie, Nixed, it was like the greatest auteur experience that when you're making a live action movie, it's always a compromise. You have this plan and this vision, but when you get there, you know, at the end of the day, you still need 10 more shots. And so you start cutting and cutting, and you just are happy that the scene's going to work, but it's not your vision. But with the animation, if I look at a sequence and says it's missing something or it's dragging, it needs more angles, it needs more coverage. If I do the work, I can get the shots I want. And I just find that to be fun. The other thing is I love making movies, and I think live action movies are the greatest art form of all time. Because with the editing, it's kind of like music with the pacing of that. Nothing's better than images with music and sound effect, and then you get comedy and you get drama. But there's also composition and color and lighting and all that stuff. It's such a great art form, but it's not a great art form to work in, because you have to work with all these personalities. Money is really the big factor. It's very, very stressful. And I also found pre-production is great. I love writing scripts. I was a storyboard artist. I love designing how it's going to come out. I love editing where it's coming together. The world of the movie looks great. But when you're on the set, the director is really the concierge of the set. Hey, you go there, you do this, yeah, that pop's okay. Oh, I'll answer this question. But most of the time you're sitting around chit-chatting, and I don't really like schmoozing. I know it looks like I would because I like to talk. When I'm around other people that I have to impress, my parents, taught me, you need to defer to other people. You shouldn't be the smartest or funniest person in the room. Let them have the floor. And I don't feel like I'm accomplishing anything. And so I'm just sitting there worrying. I'm looking at my storyboard list. Oh, I was hoping to be here by noontime, but I'm still like 5 shots behind. And you're just a professional worrier. And so I'm really excited to be making this next movie, animated movie. And my Kickstarter is really just asking for stuff I can't do, which is voice acting, mocap actors, building a great sound design and a composer, and maybe some CGI models and hard drives. But everything else, it's just going to be me just doing it because I love it. And when you make a big movie, there's a bigger payday and a bigger audience. But I found that the accolades and the audience, you only have so much time in your day. And so on all my indie movies, I got enough people saying and loving the movie, and I feel good that my art has this life, that if I made a bigger movie, I wouldn't get any more accolades or whatever, because it's the scale of it is I'm not out there. And my favorite thing is just working. I actually don't even it was fun going to Comic-Con, but I'd actually rather be at home making my next thing. Or if there's a Hollywood party, I'm like, oh, I got to go there. And then I'm nervous if I'm going to say the wrong thing, right? And, you want to hear the wrong thing I said to Steven Spielberg?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So I worked for this company, ZM, and one of the guys went on to direct this movie, Encino Man. Did you ever see that with Pauly Shore?
I saw it a long time ago. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was the storyboard artist on that. I watched your piece on Tremors. I was the storyboard artist on that. That was that was one of the great experiences I had. But they did a lot of the behind the scenes for Amblin, and they had a little trailer on the Universal lot right near Amblin. They had recently there was this whole thing of doing happy birthday films in Hollywood. And they had recently made this thing called Citizen Steve, which was a take on Citizen Kane, but it was about Steven Spielberg. And so anyway, Steven had this guy, Steve Ross, who was then the head of Time Warner, but he was dying of cancer. And everybody thought this last birthday party was going to be his last one. And so they were going to throw this big party. Everybody who he had helped in his career, from Clint Eastwood to Barbara Streisand to obviously Steven, were going to go out to Long Island and have this big party. And Steven was going to show this little fun movie. And the movie was a takeoff on It's a Wonderful Life. And it was like, what would have happened to all these people if Steve Ross hadn't been born? So I got to direct George Lucas, Barbara Streisand. I made Clint Eastwood an extra in a film where someone else was Dirty Harry. I made Clint Eastwood hold this little baby Derringer and then get shot. Quincy Jones was in it. It was just the greatest fun, right? And so in it, I put Steven Spielberg in a padded room because he goes nuts, right? Because nobody will greenlight his movies. He's making an ET out of shaving cream, sort of like when the mashed potatoes, right? And so I was there, and I just filmed Kate Capshaw, his wife, was there early. And I was telling Kate, goes, you back then, it happened all the time. You look a lot like Steven. I had like Lisa Gibbons on Entertainment Tonight start a interview with me, and I'm saying, I'm not Steven. Oh, yes, you are. Pierce Brosnan, when I was storyboarding a movie, I showed up on set and he's yelling at me, "How's Hook? Steven, how's Hook?" And I'm like, he's talking to me. Everybody's looking at me. And I go up to him, and I go, "I'm not Steven Spielberg." He goes, "But of course you are." I show him a Premiere magazine. Oh, okay, right. It happened all the time. So Kate says, you look like Steven, but you actually sound like him. And I said, well, it's really funny. I went to Steven's mom. Her last name was Adler. She had this restaurant called the Milky Way on the Pico District. And my friend and I went there. We met Mrs. Adler. And I said, Mrs. Adler, people think I look like your son. What do you think? And she goes, okay, look up at me. Now look left. Now look right. Now back up at me. Oh, you're much more handsome than Stephen is. Right? Okay. And so Kate says, oh, you should tell Stephen the story. Tell Stephen the story. Right? And I don't know. And so I tell him the story, and I'm doing his mom saying, oh, you're much more handsome than Stephen is. And he goes, I never knew my mom sounded like Saget Ray, the famous filmmaker. And that was the only thing he said to me that day. I mean, he took my direction. He was really funny in the bit that he did. He was very respectful, but he did not think it was funny. And I learned later that he's very sensitive about his looks. He's also much shorter than me. And so I must have pressed one of his buttons. And this is when he was giving young filmmakers episodes of Sequence to direct. And right. I must have really blown it, or, I wrote him a letter later on saying, there was the whole other snafu. I was up like 3 days straight. I was so tired. And then we were editing everything together, and I had filmed all of his friends in New York. If I didn't have a shtick for them, I had them sing happy birthday. And you could do a montage of somebody going, happy birthday to you, right?
Right.
And I told my editors, because we were mixing the first half while they were finishing the second half, I said, whatever you do, make sure everybody that I film, somehow their face appears in the movie. And so we finished, and I had this deadline because I had to get the thing on the plane to make it to Long Island in time for the movie. It was like really, and I finished the movie, and they come in and they also make me sign this non-disclosure agreement that I'm never going to show anybody this movie and blah, 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 right? And I'm like, and I finally go to bed, and on Monday I call George Zaloom, the producer at ZM. He's a producer. He also directed some movies. And I said, George, what did Stephen think? And he goes, Stephen loved it. He thought it was great. Except he's really pissed that Kate isn't in it. I was so tired, and the editor somehow slipped through the cracks. She wasn't in the piece, and I was too tired because I was just, and I wrote him a letter, and I called his office, and I felt guilty about it, and he never wrote back, right? And so I've always felt bad about it. But I do think that he probably wasn't that mad about it, because when I was making this indie film 8 days a week, they have these things called short ends. When they shoot a long reel film, they have a little bit left, and they don't want to do another take because it's going to run out of film. You can still give them to like student films and indie films. I called his office, and I talked to his assistant, and I introduced myself, and she knew who I was. She was really happy, and she went back and asked Stephen, and she said, we'll look into it. If we can find some, we'll give them to you. I never got any, but I thought that in their hearts they wanted to give me the short ends. And so I guess it wasn't that big a deal. But I was also really frustrated because when Steve Ross died, they had this big article. It was like 20 pages long about Steve Ross's, life and what a great New Yorker he was. And they had like 3 paragraphs on the movie that I had made and how funny it was with all of Steve Ross's friends. But they always said the film was written and directed by Steven Spielberg. And I know it dilutes the story to say that he had a young filmmaker make it, but it really bothered me. These are journalists, and I didn't even get credit in the New Yorker for making this movie. So I don't know. So, but you see, I'm kind of unhinged. But
no, I love it. You can just keep talking. Stuff. It's fine.
Okay. I just love making stuff, and so I'm trying to get the money to do the things that I can't do myself. Like I said, I love that attitude. It speaks to me, that whole like, screw it, I'll just do it myself kind of thing. As a self-published author, I know that feeling. Yeah, I just bought your book. It's really great. Yay! I went on Amazon. Great. And I don't know if you ever do a reissue. I thought the cover was good, but it could be more exciting. It could suck.
Yeah, I need another cover. I made that one myself in like an hour. So it's like, it's nothing.
Well, you know what? Maybe later on we could talk. I mean, I am so appreciative of you having me on the show. And I really like to find ways to give back. And you could call on me forever and ever. But if there's a way that maybe I could play, if you wanted to do something with the cover, maybe I could use my skill set and we could work on a cover if you want.
That sounds fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
not going to say no to that.
That you reminded me is the other thing you saw in the my pitch video is that the software now has gotten so easy to use, right? That's why I can animate this thing by myself. I'm not using the stuff like Maya or Blender, which are all great, but they're a little bit harder to use. And I'm using this thing called iClone 8 and its sister program, Character Creator. And it has been used. Some of it, every once in a while they use it. Sometimes on the Marvel movies. My friend who did the Flash TV show used it all the time to create digital doubles of the Flash and to make him run around. Right. But it's a CGI program, but you could export to Unreal or Blender or Maya or whatever. But the amazing thing about it is that you go into the character program and they have all these dials. Do you want the eyes bigger and the nose bigger? Do you want the nose up or down, mouth wider? Do you want it cartoonier? Do you want to make them look monstrous? And you can, without having the ZBrush or the Mudbox skills, you can create any character that you want. And then it's already pre-rigged. So it's got you immediately export it and it's ready to animate. And they make their money by saying, hey, do you want to have them in a turtleneck or you want to have a hat on him or whatever? They make $20 here. You might buy a sci-fi set for $30. I end up mixing and matching so it becomes my own set. But they also have what are called the blend shapes, which is what makes the mouth expressions for the lip sync or, emotions or whatever. It's all pre-rigged for you, okay? And then there are a lot of different ways. I do a lot of the traditional keyframe animation. Here's the extreme, here's the extreme. But then they have a bunch of other tools, and they have things like if you take some motion capture, they also have this thing that like it's film editing, but instead of butting up one motion capture clip to another, you could actually, if you wanted to short it or make it a better blend, you can overlap it. And when you overlap it, it kind of does some computer thing and it kind of makes it work. It kind of like smooths it out or, changes it based on how far you overlap it. They also, it hooks up immediately. You could simultaneously do facial mocap with the little headgear on it while doing the body mocap, right? It's really phenomenal. But along with that, now there's a app and it's not an AI app. I'm not against or for AI. I just don't have time to learn it. But there's a motion capture app that came out called move.ai. And what it does is you can take like your own iPhones from 2 to 12 and you kind of put them in a circle and it can capture, it does almost James Cameron Avatar level mocap. You can actually, if you go on to my Instagram or TikTok, I have a couple demonstrations of it, or you saw a little taste of it in the video there. And it's really amazing. Now, I don't just use the mocap because I'm not trying to make my piece super realistic. It's a little bit exaggerated. My characters are a little taller. They're not cartoony because it's an adult R-rated action thing, but the eyes are a little bit bigger and they're a little bit stronger. Their proportions aren't totally human-like. And I've kind of created a painterly texture map because I can't do realistic rendering. But I also don't want it to be cartoony because there's lots of blood and guts and some scary aliens. I don't remember where and even with the animation, if I take the mocap, when somebody walks, I might change where the pelvis is. So there's a little bit more bounce to the walk. So it's a little bit more, Disney-esque, a better animation rather than just a copy of realism. But the reason I tell you this is that if you're somebody who's I can't animate, I can't draw or whatever, you can get this mocap and you could mocap your whole movie and you'd learn how to smooth it out. You could get 95% of your animation through mocap. And I don't really like the facial mocap that much because it makes the lip sync more like real life. Right. But
you get that uncanny valley thing.
They don't go, Peter Parker picked up pepper. Right. So I also hand animate the expressions. And also I find that because maybe if I had a good actor, facial mocapping would be better. But when I'm doing it myself, I don't get the timing right. But I always like when he's emphasizing, I know exactly where I'm going to do it. And so I custom make all the expression. But I'm talking about this is something that if you had never animated before, in a weekend, you could be making really pretty cool animations. And I hopefully want to inspire other people that because I come from an indie background, Shoot 'em Up was an aberration. I got to make one studio movie. All my other movies were, independent. And I know what it's like that you have this burning desire to tell a story, make a movie, but you can't get the production value, or the scope is so small, but you really are a sci-fi or a horror nut, but you can't, get the visual effects or whatever the great location or traveling around the world. Now you could do it. And I mean, I'm not going to say my movies, rendering looks as good as Pixar or whatever, but I think it looks a little bit better than The Bad Batch. And at the end of the day, it's about the story and the content. And if you could make something like Bad Batch quality, wouldn't you want to learn to make it? So, and a lot of the software, it's $1,000 for iClone, but you could test it out for a month to see whether or not it's going to work. So you're not going to lose money unless you really want to buy it. And all the models are so cheap. I just think more people are going to be able to make really high quality, high production value looking movies, but independently and as animated CGI pieces. And so one of my rewards is these detailed tutorials and weekly updates where they can see exactly the process. This week I'm designing the alien, or I'm having the alien fight, and here's what I'm struggling with. Or I wrote the script and I realized that it's a sci-fi heist film, and it has all the archetypes. It has the brains. Instead of a getaway driver, there's a getaway pilot you saw in there. There's the safe cracker, the master of disguise, demolitions. But, there's always one character that's the muscle, like the Jason Statham type. And I realized, I love robots so much, but I haven't made a real cool robot character. But of course, I love robots. And so what I might do, and I've actually, I made it, and I did a demo, you can see it on the Kickstarter site, is like, I want to have a robot, but I don't know what style I should use. Like, you could make, and I have this idea of maybe the entire robot is based on a gun, like its hands are guns, right? And its head is a gun and a muzzle or whatever. And it could be big and strong, like the typical muscle, or it could be really sleek, like a sniper gun, right? And then I thought, there's this movie, I'm going to get it. Is it the Kubrick's The Killing or Kubrick's The Killer, right? Remember that?
Right.
His first black and white movie. And the character's a thief, and he has this clown face. And so I've designed this robotic thief that looks like the main character in The Killing, right, with his clown mask on, but it's robotic. I could go do that. And I mentioned to you before, I'm friends with George Lazenby, the James Bond from On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So I made a robotic George Lazenby, and maybe I'll George be in the movie. So I have and I go, I'm going to engage with the people that are my backers and say, what do you think I should do? Because I can't decide. And then I'll put up a poll, right? And so they could be involved in the creative process, and but also they can see me go through the process step by step. And I also will, I love these behind the scenes, commentary on these DVDs, but there's never enough time, and it's kind of too detailed to say, why did you make that decision? Or what were you thinking here, right? And what does it have to do with the story? Or like you remember in Shoot 'em Up, there's the Paul Giamatti has that limerick. I like to tell dirty jokes and dirty limerick. There once was a woman who was quite begat who had 3 kids from that and that. Well, my dad told me that limerick, and so it's about a pregnant woman. It's off color, right? So it fits thematically with the movie, but it delights me so much that it feels like I'm investing part of me, even though it's a bombastic shoot 'em up. How do you make a movie like that have your own voice that only you could have made it? And what is it that is personal to you? And obviously there's so much James Bond stuff in the movie. It's an homage to James Bond, sort of, although nobody laughs. Clive Owen, Mr. Smith, has this Walther PPK and it jams on him, right? And it's the Bond gun, and he goes, piece of crap, and throws it. Nobody in the theaters laughed. I'm like, it's the greatest, easiest Easter egg ever. Anyway. But again, there are all these things that are very personal to me, right? And it makes the movie less homogenized than most action movies, where you can't do anything weird or offbeat or unhinged. But I got to put all that stuff in there. And that's what really, when you see something in a movie that's a little bit off, And I was like this. I had an art school teacher who had the greatest advice for anybody doing something creative. It doesn't matter, painting or writing, whatever. He says, your mistakes are your style. And in the movies, I say, like, I know this is a blasphemy, but I'm not a big fan of Woody Allen. Okay. They're just not cinematic and they're witty, but they're like, you know, like, and I like the underdog trying to win the girl, but I don't really identify with him because he makes so many stupid mistakes, right? And so you could say that the fact that his movies are so dialogue heavy and not very cinematic, it's a mistake not to take advantage of cinema. That's his mistake, but it's also his style because you really focus. Or, okay, they're really stupid and big, like the Michael Bay movies, right? But can't you appreciate, have you seen how well photographed those movies are? And he's so thoughtful, but he's at a wide lens or it's at a long lens with very small depth of field. And it looks painterly because the background is so soft. Is it slow motion? Is it, you know, whatever? His mistake is that the stories don't have rich characters, but he does invest a lot of energy in the look of it. So his mistake is his style. And you look at all these people, like, I mean, some of it's a physical thing. What's the famous El Greco? He used to make those paintings with his character.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he had a problem with his eyes, right? That actually it looked normal through his eyes. It did look like normal proportions, but because his lenses were different for everybody else, they were extended. That was actually a physical mistake that generated his style. But I think that's a great way to look at it. But I think that the studio people, they don't want to have too much mistakes or too much of a personal style.
They want homogeneity. Yeah.
Right. And I'll tell you a story which kind of led to me saying, oh, phooey. So after Shoot 'Em Up, you saw, I put it in a little video, I was in director's jail. People loved the movie, but it was not a hit. And if you do not have a hit in the movie theaters, they're not going to hire you. I went in and pitched on the sequel to that movie, Red. Do you remember the Bruce Willis, Helen Hunt?
Yeah.
And I would have been a choice. It was action. It was assassins, right? And I went in and pitched like the VP. And the VP called my agent and says, well, that's got to be about the best director's pitch I've ever seen. And by the way, it was like a medium one for me. It was like my it was.
It's your wheelhouse, though. So yeah.
He later went on, but because you know what? we're never going to get to hire Michael. So again, why have me pitch? But he says, because my boss is going to go, well, how did his last movie do? And the guy goes, well, I can't hire him. Didn't make a hit. And his boss would not take the time 90 minutes to watch to see whether I had the talent. That maybe was another reason why my film wasn't a hit. The big choice, the big cheese has to make the big choice. Who do you get to direct? And he's not willing to take 90 minutes to watch a movie that's fun. And that's
because it's not about talent. It's about your ability to make the money. Yeah.
Well, it's also for them to have deniability. How was I know the movie was going to flop? The last two movies he made were a hit. We thought he'd be great. But right. The other thing I thought was, I understood it, but I also disagree with it. He says, we want to make a movie that has the tone of Red and Red 2. We want it to be a Red movie. We don't, and this is actually what most filmmakers want. You want to have a signature. You want to say, oh, that's a Wes Anderson movie, or it's a Woody Allen movie. That's what you want it to, people can recognize your fingerprints. But he says, we don't want your fingerprints, Michael. We would be afraid all your movies has your own voice to it. We don't want that, right? And I'm like, wait a second. Number one, the first thing you're going to get is way more better action, because that's what I love. Look at, don't you? Everybody goes to the movies and see, was it a cool action? Was it a thrilling joyride, right? You're going to get that. And if I'm changing, the only way I could invest my voice is if I changed stuff that wasn't in the script or changed the dialogue, which I'm not going to do. You're going to look at the dailies every day. And if you think I'm jumping off the rails, you call me on the phone and chew me out, right? But I'm not. It's going to be a Red movie with really good action, but they're so afraid that I'm going to put my stamp on it, right? Yeah, and I have to tell you, there's this crazy story. So that movie Uncharted, did you ever play the video game Uncharted?
I played the video game. I never saw the movie. Yeah.
Okay, and you're fine. The movie was okay. But the games were really pretty good, but they basically were modern day Indiana Jones. And I actually think the Indiana Jones benefits from being a period piece, because it's sort of like a sword and sorcery or science fiction piece. When you're in another time, if something's fantastical, you kind of believe it more because you're not going to compare it to what it's in your, it doesn't look like everyday life. It's so apparent. It's so out of this world.
Right. It's like another level of being divorced from it. Yeah.
But the Nazis were the ultimate, James Bond villains. They're crazy, right? But also with the uniforms and the tanks and all that, or if you're in the future Star Wars, it just feels more realistic. So I don't know, where was I going with the whole time frame thing? I'm unhinged. No one knows anyway. Now I can't remember, but so I didn't get Red 2, but they loved for me to take 2 weeks of my time to come in and pitch, even though they knew they were never.
They knew they weren't going to hire you anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, and so ultimately, after Shoot 'Em Up, I went on and I wrote a pilot. I went in on meetings. And maybe they'd let me direct. And the other thing is, I never got excited about most assignments because I always liked having my own voice, but also I have to say I'm not really that courageous. When you're on the set, everybody's looking, is he a good director? Should we follow him into battle? And I always felt if I wrote a script good enough for someone to finance, that validated me. Even if I sucked as a director, I must have been good enough because I wrote the story. And so I felt I had more command. But when you're making a movie, you benefit from so many other people's talent. Like if you had a good DP, good AD, good production designer, great script, great cast, my mom could direct a good movie because all these people are so good and they protect you. You could literally do nothing, right?
There have been movies made that way, yeah.
yeah, and you'd be surprised. And so, I don't really find it that fun to do the live action. As I said, you're just waiting around, and so I'm really happy. So a financer said he wanted to do something political. He's behind the scenes in the White House, and we came up with this idea that if I was going to hand animate it, why not make it an animated political cartoon? When I was growing up, I thought I might be a political cartoonist. There was this guy, Herb Block from the Washington Post. And I remember going to the Kennedy Center. They had a whole display of his work. And so we ended up arriving on this movie Nixed. And it's about Richard Nixon solving the JFK assassination. And the movie is really funny. And 95% of it is true because I didn't have an axe to grind as to who I really thought did it. All I wanted to do is take all the real, and I corroborated it in multiple sources, these really weird, funny stories or absurd or seemingly absurd, weird, stranger than strange but true things about that, and put them all jam-packed into this movie with Nixon kind of acting as a detective to solve the Kennedy assassination. And the thing about it is Nixon actually really was obsessed with the Kennedy assassination because a lot of the people he dealt with the Bay of Pigs invasion, he was in charge of that when he was vice president. And some of these other characters that were involved in Watergate later on were sort of peripheral characters around the Kennedy assassination. And so he was really interested because he thought it could ruin his second term. They had warehoused the actual limousine that Kennedy was killed in, and Nixon actually wanted it shipped to the White House so he could study it for clues
for himself.
So it wasn't that absurd that he was a detective. It was just I made it more overt. Two things about that, but I'll give you an example of things that are really crazy. So, Oswald did not do it. Number one, after the Kennedy was shot, Oswald knew something was up. He was kind of a non-commissioned agent for the FBI and the CIA. He defected to Russia, but the CIA had this false defector program to plant people there. But Kennedy is shot. Oswald knows something's weird going on. So he goes back to his house to go get his revolver. Well, if he knew he was going to be on the run and needed to protect himself, wouldn't he have hidden and brought the revolver with him to the Texas Book Depository rather than going back? But that's not the craziest thing. He needs to get back to his house fast, and he flags down a cab. And there are plenty of people tell the story. And there's another little old lady flagging down wanting the same cab. The world is after him. People are going to try to kill him to silence him, right? He gives the first cab to the little old lady, even though his life is in danger.
Right.
Number one, that's not an assassin, and it's a true story. It's crazy. The other story thing I want to tell you is, of course, I'm a big James Bond fan. I love Sean Connery, and I they have this screening room in the White House. And at the time, when Nixon was president, was when Murder on the Orient Express came out, right? The original, and Sean Connery's in it. And so I made a little scene where Nixon is watching Murder on the Orient Express. And I didn't have to do it, but I made sure I got a close-up of Sean Connery so I could have a Sean Connery in one of my movies, which is just
Nice.
like awesome. So, but that's the power of, doing your things on your own. If I were doing it live action, number one, you're not going to get Sean Connery. They're not going to want to license the clip.
Yeah, you just the license just a picture of him. Yeah,
right. And they go, you don't need this extra shot. It's going to take another 2 hours. But or if you were doing it with an animation studio, if they were cutting corners, they might have cut out Connery's close up. I made sure it really looked like him.
Right.
So,
no, I mean,
anyway.
like that's the democratization of art. I think that's a beautiful thing, and that's what I love about the 21st century.
I mean, I've always loved, like, I had made this movie Beanstalk from Charlie Band. Have you reviewed any of the Charlie Band movies?
Not yet, not yet. It's on my list though.
Okay. But I was directing a movie for him, Beanstalk. Oh, God, you know what? You have going in so many million places, and I'm going, I'm going to tell you the story, but and now
I'm just letting you go. I'm not giving you any direction. I'm just letting you.
It was my first movie. But it was so low budget. Like, it's Beanstalk. It's a kid against a giant. I had they only allowed me to budget 25 visual effects shots for a whole movie with a giant.
Oh my gosh!
And I remember that I was really pretty good for me, but they showed it over at Disney, and because it had such low production values, right? I thought it was going to be a way that it was going to be a showpiece, a portfolio piece that I could get a studio movie. But the movie, because it was so B-movie, low-budget production values, they couldn't get past that and say, look how ingenious the guy is. I realized the only way I'd get to direct is if I financed it myself. So I took my life savings and I made this movie 8 days a week. And the amazing thing is I ended up getting Carrie Russell right before she broke. And it was only years later that my casting director told us that my second choice was the girl who played Buffy the Vampire Slayer. My casting guys made my career. They found all these great actors. There's this great character actor that showed up on The Office, Mike Starr, right, who was in my movie Monster Man. And it was his first movie ever, but I just thought he was awesome. I said, you're going to be awesome. And so, sometimes you have to just take your destiny into your own hands. And so I've always been in a position of, having to make my own opportunity. And I realized I was at a deli one time and the booth over was Chris Nolan, right? And the interesting thing is a couple of years earlier, I had this 8 days a week was at Slam Dance, and it won the audience award at Slam Dance. And a few years earlier, Chris Nolan had this movie Following that won the audience award. And so you can almost see that we at one point we were even. We had our start right. Of course, then he becomes this gigantic guy. I actually think 8 days a week is way more fun than Following. But I was there and I noticed that his haircut was perfectly sculptured. And every time you see a photograph, it's like he gets a haircut every day. And he was still in his suits. But I actually think this is very smart. Because if they're going to give you $100 million, you have to look like $1 million. And I just am a t-shirt, sneakers, and jeans kind of guy. I'm never going to look like $1 million. And I'm also, because you were unhinged, and I get so excited, I think if I were a studio, I'd be, well, is this guy going to go crazy? We can't give him that much money, right? And I understand that now. It's human nature. I mean, And people like talk about ageism in the business, like Billy Wilder wanted to direct movies when he was in his late 60s, 70s. Everybody thought he was too old. But when you make a movie, even if you're a production executive, a studio person, or a producer, you're going to spend a lot of time hanging out with these people on the set, dinners and lunches or early breakfasts. And if you're going to spend that much time, you want to at least feel how you're going to connect with somebody. And if I were a young 30-year-old, I would feel uncomfortable giving criticism to somebody who is my dad's age. And they may not know that they're doing it consciously, but subconsciously they're saying, I'm not going to enjoy this experience, or he makes me feel uncomfortable just because of the age gap. And if I were in their positions, I'd feel like, and I'd also think, well, somebody my age and my age is going to the movies. Michael Davis's age, age group isn't going to the movies. They're not he's not going to get it, right? But like, I'll tell you this crazy story about it. So I'm okay with, I understand it. It sucks. But so if you saw 8 Days a Week, there's this scene where the buddy character, tells the hero that he's going to have sex with a watermelon. He read about it in a porn magazine. And he's going to leave the watermelon out in the sun so it heats up. So it's going to feel like the real thing, right? And so it happens off screen, but he does it with a watermelon. Well, I made this movie 2 years before American Pie. And the big thing in American Pie is the kid does it with apple pie, which I don't understand because there's not enough resistance. With the thing would crumble in a second. Watermelon makes more sense. But one of the producers heard about my movies and he said, will you send it? We want to consider you for American Pie. So, sure. 3 weeks later, the producer calls me and he says, well, I have to tell you. So, I loved your movie. We sent it over to Universal, and the young exec guy saw it. And in the middle of watching the movie, he calls me up and goes, this is the guy. This is the guy. This is Michael Davis. Is the perfect guy to do. He's got a beautiful girl. He's got a horny boy. It's all about sex. It's R-rated. The writing's great. The performances are great. And he has watermelon fucking, right? And we have apple pie cooking. What would be the perfect showpiece? I can't believe it, right? He hasn't even finished watching the movie. It was the watermelon that sealed it. And then he says, so you tell me about Michael. How old is he? Oh, he must be like early, mid-30s. Oh, he's way too old. The studio has the mandate to hire like a 27-year-old. He's way too old to direct. But you just saw my movie was perfect. It was a perfect showpiece, and I'm too old in my 30s? In my 30s?
That's insane.
That's the insanity you're dealing with. And, I've struggled with depression and sadness. And I was raised thinking that the world would be a meritocracy, that if you were talented and good, you could matriculate up. But it's surreal. It's the film business, the way decisions are made. And most filmmakers will have the stories I just told you. We all have stories like that of this injustice. And I'm not that, I come off big and loud, but I'm really, I don't like confrontation. And so my entire career has been like, hey, 8 days a week, win Slam Dance. I don't get a job and nobody's going to hire me. Yeah, everybody loves the movie, but it took me 3 years to get distribution with Warner Brothers to make my life savings back in the movie. I'm really sad. And then somebody says, oh, we want to make a teen movie like you. What do you got? And they say, I say 100 Girls. And I do a couple of those. I think they're distributed on video by Lionsgate. This will get me to a bigger level. Nope. And then I do this horror movie. And at this point I go, well, I'm going to be a straight to video guy. And all I want to do is make a ton of money, not a ton of movies. So I have enough money to pay the bills and I can just spend my life making movies, even though I'm never going to be big, probably, right? Because there was this thing that if you make straight to video movies, that's who you are. They used to have Variety, used to have a weekly magazine that was their version of the news of the home video business, the VHS or whatever. And they had this article, and it was entitled, it was so funny, The Power Players in the Straight to Video Movie Market, the 10 greatest directors, power players, right? And I was one of the top 10, right? You know how many phone calls I got by being one of the top 10 power players? Zero. None, right? Yeah. Because they don't care. One year they had a thing called that was basically the Academy Awards for straight to video movies. And in my movie, 100 Girls won Best Picture. Does it matter? No, it doesn't. They're judging you because they're just judging you by the statistics. It's almost like I always my son had these Pokemon cards, and the water power or the fire power, right? And they just look at you at your stats like a Pokemon card. Box office low, right? All his movies are straight to video. Does he know any actors that he could get in this movie? No, right? And then that's how they decide. It's not about they make you come in and say, this is my vision, but they've already decided whether or not. They don't really care that you have this great idea. I went to film school with this guy, and maybe it does matter. This guy, Richard Lewis, got to direct Runaway Jury, that from a John Grisham novel, right?
Right.
Basically a courtroom movie, people sitting around, right? And then the lawyers going away and the jury being sequestered away, right? And how do you get a studio excited about a jury and how your vision is going to be? Richard, and he told me this, he went and he says, this is not a courtroom movie. This is a heist movie. It's all about, the getting away with it and stealing it. And the pace is going to be like a heist movie. And even just, I'm going to get the score by this composer who did this heist movie. And actually intellectually, and I think he did pull it off. How do you translate that cinematically? I'm not sure. But as an intellectual idea and a one-liner that you can go to the boss and say, well, why should we do Richard Lewis? He said, it should be like a heist movie. That's a great idea. It sounds pretty cool. So yeah, maybe the director's pitch, but you have to make it so like easy that it's not lost in translation, because you're not going to get in to see the boss and see your excitement. You have to create something that someone else can pitch for you. And he created the perfect one-liner that somebody would send him up. So, but it's basically, is the guy a successful director, and has he worked in this genre before? And even if you do watermelon fucking, it doesn't mean you get American Pie. It's crazy.
That is the wisdom I will take from this.
Yeah, and I have friends that are a little bit frustrating. I should have gone in the film business, and at the end of the day, life is really about having fun with what you do, like what you're doing. You've loved movies your entire life. You have a fan base. I love some of the editing and the stylistic, especially in the Tremors thing with your other friend came in and said, you're stealing my 1990s thing. And then you have that thing where you superimpose the face on top of a still photograph. It was sort of like a head version of Clutch Cargo, right? You ever watch Clutch Cargo, right?
Yeah.
It was really fun, right? And you're using all the tricks because you recognize that to make this point, you had to make it cinematic and fun, and you needed a directorial concept or idea to make that section work. And so it's the same thought process, but you're in control. You are the auteur. Nobody's telling what you want to do. And I am hoping that you love your life, you love what you're doing, and you have less of these idiots. There have been some. Like I mentioned, like most, I storyboarded for John McTiernan, and I like John. I was upset that he had to go to prison for a while. The one thing
and there was that
John had that I don't have, he has this presence like he's a general. Like if you were going to get somebody to be one of the commanders of D-Day, he's this big, tall, strong-willed guy, and people follow him. And most of his crew, we were down in Mexico doing Medicine Man. I got to see Sean Connery there. Is that he's hired them so many times. He's been responsible for their livelihood that they'll do anything for him. And so he doesn't have to present himself as the big man. He can do whatever he wants. But for me, when I direct, it's like reinventing myself each time. And it's just very stressful directing. And, I don't know. I had another point. The old guy.
I mean, I had a chat with Bruce Joel Rubin a few years back.
Sure.
Bruce Joel, yeah.
He did Ghost, right, and all that, right?
Yeah, he did Ghost and Jacob's Ladder and Brainstorm.
Did he want to direct, or did he get to direct something, or not?
He was going to direct a couple of movies. He never actually did, I don't think. But after talking to him and talking to other people who've been in Hollywood, they all kind of tell me the same thing, that I'm probably happier for not going that route.
Yes, that's what I was thinking.
If I am enjoying what I'm doing and I'm living a good life, why would I want to be in Hollywood where all that would be gone? I might be
Right.
richer, but I wouldn't be happy. And I think that that's how I look at it, and I think that makes me feel content. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and
and I enjoy what I'm doing. And I wouldn't,
yeah,
you're like you, I wouldn't enjoy sitting around at a movie set. That sounds boring.
no. And the other thing that is also the culture is that, let's say you go to any social thing, like you're invited to the premiere, right? And somebody invited you, and then afterwards they're a little, cocktail thing. And you kind of feel obligated to be there, and maybe there's an opportunity you can meet somebody. But it's this really basically a contest of seeing where you are on the ladder. People go, well, what are you up to? And if I said, oh, I got hired to rewrite this script, the person is, well, that's great. And they would go, well, I'm actually directing a movie. It's starting in 3 months. And there's this feeling like I'm better than you because, it's like, are you on a Super Bowl team or not? But it's this pervasive, and if you are hot, then people are falsely friendly to you, right? And they aren't really your friends. I mean, I understand business and it's fine, but there's all this, it's kind of fake. And you also feel like you're always promoting yourself. Now, look, I look like I'm a big promoter. I'm on your show promoting my animated movie, right? But I actually don't like chasing the movie, the money, or having to, but in Hollywood, it's always promoting yourself, and you're only as good as the last thing you did. And it's just no fun when you go out. And I found now that I hardly ever have. I just in my garage. Okay, see, I showed you. It's actually not so cool, everybody, but it looks better now.
He's not really on a space station.
No, I'm not. But I try to. Again, everything's about presentation. I try to make my presentation consistent. That I used to, you'd go and you'd take a meeting, and then you wait to hear 3 weeks that, oh, you're not going to get the job, or they didn't like your script, or they like the script, but they're not making that anymore. And then 2 months later, they buy a script in the same genre or whatever. It really affected my mood, and I was constantly, feeling depressed. And I fought when I was a kid. I was the third kid, and I suffered from, I was sent to a psychiatrist when I was in junior high. I used to cry before going to school and junior high because it just was so unhappy. And now that I'm animating, I'm not put into these situations where I'm constantly competing or being compared, or that I have to puff up or dress up what I'm doing, because all I want to do is make stuff, and so now. And the other thing that's funny is I was really afraid that my kids would see me as this sad person. And I actually found it now to be a blessing that Shoot 'Em Up did not perform, because my son was having trouble making the adjustment between junior high and elementary school. And he wasn't getting his homework done. He wasn't scheduling his homework, how he was going to do his workflow, studying for tests. And I literally sat with him every day after school and said, this is how you organize it. Tell me what your homeworks are. Is there anything coming up that's not due tomorrow? And he got really good. And then when we ended up deciding the public school wasn't great, we sent him to, it wasn't that expensive, Catholic school. But he had to take this, like, to get into high school, a math test. And he scored really high. The school even said, you did really amazing at math. But in 7th grade, he's really smart, but he was getting like C's, right?
Right.
I really feel grateful that I had time to be there for my son, that if Shoot 'Em Up had taken off, I would have gotten another job. Maybe it would have been away for 7 months, and I wasn't going to be able to get this discipline. He's amazing. He got accepted. He started making music for rappers, and they have this Clive Davis Institute of Recorded Music at NYU, and they only accept 60 students a year. And he got in, right? And
Awesome.
And most he's recently graduated now. And one of the artists that he did the music for, his album was voted by NPR to be one of the best hip hop albums of the year. And my son did 2 songs for him, right?
Very cool.
But again, he found his art, he found his passion. But what if I had been away making these movies, right? And so I really kind of, maybe things worked out the way they were supposed to. And I'm no longer depressed, because I realized I love Hollywood movies, but I just don't like the process. And I found a way to make stuff. And in some, like, when all my contemporaries, because I went to school with a lot of great guys. Like I used to write, I did this movie Double Dragon, and my writing partner was Peter Gould, who now did Better Call Saul, and he
worked on Double Dragon. Wait a minute, you worked on Double Dragon?
Yeah, he was my writing partner, but he now does Breaking Bad. He's going out pitching his new show. We're still really best buddies. I went to school with Michael Lehman, that if I get my Kickstarter, he's going to be a guest on it. I went to school with Jay Roach, who did Austin Powers. I was friends down the street with Matt Weiner, who did Mad Men. And all these people have done this great work. But I bet you when they're 75, nobody's going to hire them. But I'm going to be making my next animated sci-fi movie at 75 and having a blast, right? Because nobody can stop me. And so I really feel like.
Besides, you already met Monica Bellucci, so what more is there to do?
Yeah, that's true. And Kerry Russell, remember that?
Right, and Kerry Russell, right?
And Clive Owen at the time was like, he was the guy. Like Toby Emmerich, the head of the studio at New Line. When I get Clive Owen, I get Paul Giamatti and Monica Bellucci, because I've never had a movie with a director on each of the main roles got his first choice. Never happened. That's amazing, right? The other thing is that what is like. I also think that like they're like there's a director that he had done a couple of medium-sized movies, then he got a gigantic movie, and my friend was working on it, and this guy, when he would go to the set, he'd talk to his assistant. So what scene are we shooting today? He didn't care. He didn't prep. He just showed up, and then he would go fishing with the camera. But he probably enjoyed directing better because he didn't have a vision and a shot list that this is what I hope to get. This is how I really imagine. He
wasn't putting his heart and soul into it. It was just a job.
Right, and so he was never disappointed. It was what it was. And so then he never had this fear of failure or that it didn't turn out the way that he really wanted it to be. And I think those directors are better qualified in some ways, although the work might not be as good. But I felt this enormous pressure because I used to draw and storyboard. So I really could visualize exactly how I wanted something to be. But most of the time I couldn't get that because of time, money, and budget. And so I actually think I'm better suited doing this animation thing. Plus, when I was a little kid, I wanted to be an animator. And my dad said, I don't think you want to sit around a desk. You want to be out there doing stuff. Go to art school. I wanted to go to Cal Arts. They have this great animation program. He said, no, why don't you, if you still want to be an animator after undergrad, you go back, right? And then halfway through art school, I realized I wanted to be a live action director. I thought that's when I fell in love with Steven Spielberg and Star Wars and Indiana Jones. And I had this ambitious, but little did I know that my temperament was more of that artist animator that just wanted to sit at his desk rather than going out into this big, bad, corrupt world. And so I'm glad to hear that you've talked to these people and you realize that happiness is the most important thing. And that you
when you're talking about like schmoozing with people and having to constantly big yourself up and deal with that constant one-upmanship, I've dealt with that too, like going to writers' conferences in New York and just trying to talk to other writers who are trying to get published or pitch my stuff to agents and actual publishers. And that it's like acid in your mind. It really eats away at you. And to be away from that and to just be like, if I write something, I can publish it myself on Amazon and not worry about it. Yeah, I won't make as much money, but who cares?
Yeah, but maybe you've seen that show Silo, right?
Yeah, I love that show.
Right? If you keep writing and putting stuff out there, you could end up being the Silo guy. But I can understand when you go to New York, maybe with genre novels it's different, but with literary fiction, it's like you have to be in the in crowd. We had a short story published in the New Yorker, and then you did a novelette, not a full novel because they didn't want to publish that. And there's this whole new insider thing that you probably fought when you went to writers' conferences. It's like
absolutely
there's a story behind the story, like Jackson Pollock. Okay, maybe he's good or whatever. Nobody talks about that he slept with one of the Guggenheim daughters. Well, who do you think patronized him and kept him going if his, girlfriend's dad is a millionaire patron of the arts and he's, Daddy, my boyfriend needs help. He's a painter. What if he hadn't met her? What if he wasn't from New York? Would Jackson Pollock be? There's always a story behind the story, or many times there's a story behind the story, And again, that's why I always wanted to be a writer director, because I could, I was directing my own script, there was some credibility that I knew something because I wrote a script good enough that somebody would spend money on. And it's hard to find good scripts. As a writer, writing is the hardest thing because you have control of the vision, but there's a pace. Do you have the objectivity? Have you picked a concept that's going to resonate? And then did you pick the right foible for the hero? And if you make the wrong choice, the script, it might come out pretty good, but what if you'd taken that other path? And also, until you have a hit novel, right? Nobody's going to believe that your first novel is going to be the greatest thing,
Right.
But it could be, but unless you have the validation, and so you have to have the fortitude. But if I were to do it again, I'd become an author, and I would be the print on demand guy. I would skip the whole thing. I would do the Amazon thing and say, look. I had this great story. I'm hoping maybe some of the people that are watching if they're not filmmakers, maybe they want to be writers. I was researching the print on demand and the whole self-publishing thing. And there was a husband and wife team that really wanted to become novelists. And so in the first year, they actually made $80,000. But they wrote 12 novels, right? And they all made like $7,000, right?
Right.
And the next year they made $120,000, but they only wrote 5 novels, but they still made like $60,000 from their library of the years before.
Right.
And then each year their following started liking them.
Just snowballing.
But they also had a bigger library, and they could write less and less. And then as they got a following, their writing got better because it wasn't so rushed. And now they maybe do 1 novel or 2 novels a year. And they wrote their way with a work ethic into being a self-published, sustaining. And wouldn't you rather have that than, having to go on book tours? And if your next novel flops, your publisher drops you. And then your writing is, half of it is in the back of your mind. You're thinking, you're fearful. What if this is this is the last book I write? Because if you figure out how to, I just think it's this, I wish the internet and the computer thing was around when I was really young, because I probably would have just tried to be a self-published author, And,
back when we were younger, like self-publishing, doing the
You're a young man. You're way younger.
I'm older than I look, I swear.
Okay, but did you know that I think it was Dashiell Hammett wrote his first novel when he was 48?
Yeah.
How old was Tom Clancy when he wrote his first novel? 50s,
I don't know.
Right?
Yeah,
and
but I met Tom Clancy. I was not impressed with that man.
Okay, I'm gonna. You know what? I have to tell you, there are a lot of these filmmakers that I met. Oh, now I remembered when I went off the track, because I liked your thing. We were talking about Tremors.
Yeah.
Okay, the greatest thing is like when I worked with Ron Underwood. Okay, he hired me as a storyboard artist. But unlike the people this is when I was talking about John McTiernan. Now I remember. John McTiernan would basically say, draw it the way you would direct it, right? Or when I was on the Ninja Turtles, there'd be a big fight in a toy store. And the director would say, just draw me a bunch of gags, a bunch of ideas. And I drew so much, sometimes because I didn't render that much. I could draw like 120 panels a day. And I would walk in here with a stack of like this high of ideas. But the guy was so exhausted, right? From doing his other things, that he'd never look at all these gems in here, right? Or it was really funny. Like, did you ever see that movie Jack Frost with Michael Keaton?
I have not seen Jack Frost.
It's a snowman, magical snowman movie, right?
Yeah.
Well, they were hiring these punch-up writers who would get paid like $200,000 a week to punch up the script because they're about to make it, right? Well, when they came out with the trailer, all the trailer's gags were my storyboard gags. Like there was this great gag that there was a chase with the bullies, and the snowman was throwing the snowballs and the bullies were throwing. And at one point, the bullies throw these snowballs and 2 of them land on his chest. And now it looks like the snowman has boobs. He goes, ah, right. And that was in the trailer. But of course, I was making $2,000 a week. But my ideas were way better than the writers that they were paying $200,000 a week. But so I tell you, all these directors didn't really have a vision. Ron Underwood, fantastic. He came in, he had these 3x5 cards, and they were sometimes stick figures or close to a stick figure, but he would also write out what he was doing. And he'd had me draw his vision, right? And it was great because I didn't have to think. All I had to do was, great, now here's a 3x5 stick figure. Great. He had a vision, and I drew everything that I drew. Not only was his vision, but it was a tool that he could actually go and show people this is what we're going to do. And he went on, and when he did his storyboards, he was also thinking, I only have a half a day for this scene, so I only want to get 8 shots. But if you don't know how much, if you don't have a vision,
if you don't know what the limitations are, yeah,
I might make it an epic scene just because I love the scene, but it has no function because it's too it would be it would give the wrong communication to the crew about how much work was necessary here. There's a whole commerce. And I mean, I think one of the real talents of a good director is understanding time management of what can you get in this amount of time and whether you can do that, make that work or not. And so I've told you all these stories about people that are unprepared or crazy or stupid or didn't do the work, or the executive that wouldn't watch a movie to see whether I could get on the director's list. I really admire Ron because he had a vision. He couldn't draw, but I felt better about my storyboards because I knew that they really were going to help the movie. But when I came up with a stack of Ninja Turtles ideas, unless the guy took them like the snowball thing, right? I kind of felt like they paid me, but it was like throwing the stuff into the wind that I was earning a living, but there was no value. Nobody, I would ask the director, I said, do you want to do this as a one camera thing, a mise-en thing, or do you want to make it really cutty? Do you want to do it as a wide, like Sergio Leone line, like with the characters really small? Or do you want to do it all details, like the twitchy fingers and the fly and the hand?
Right.
Every scene has its own language. Tell me what language, because I could take any scene and I could come up with probably 10 different concepts for the same scene. But it's no fun. I don't want to pick, because I'm going to pick wrong and the director is going to do something different.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but again, I was going back to my Blast 'em Up. One of the reasons why like these Pixar movies cost $100 million is so much is getting the okay and verifying that this is where we want to marshal our forces. The director has an idea, and then they have the gag artists and storyboard artists. This is how I want to do the scene. And then the director will have some points, and then the storyboard artist will revise it, right? And then he goes, like, sometimes it'll be 3 or 4 times, and then they give it to their sub-directors, actually. It's like there's a director that just directs, Wreck-It Ralph. There's a director that focuses on directing the animators that do the girls. So it's like a director, but then you got like these backup directors, the assistant coaches. Right. And then you get the animators start animating it. And then there are all these revisions, like I think the timing's too slow, or you should have the eyebrow up here. And there's all these changes because either there's a committee that slows it down, or it's not what the top guy's vision is. And it's a very lumbering, top heavy, too many people working on it. But if I'm lighting it and I go, oh, I love the color of the light, and I'm productions, I love that set that I just did, and I love that camera move, and I'm doing the acting. Think about all the people that I'm not having to do a storyboard to check that off. Now give that storyboard to him to do it. I'm doing all these things simultaneously. So if I'm making a movie for $100,000, but I'm one guy and there's 100 other people working on a Pixar movie, you take $100,000 times 100, right? And you got a big expensive thing. And that's why my movie can almost have the quality of one of those big movies. But because it's the same thing, I'm just cutting out basically the okay process, the confirmation. This is what we're going to do. Will you sign off on it? And that's fun.
Yeah.
And the same thing with your writing. You're creating the universe. I bet you just don't have enough time to write as much as you want. I mean,
basically, yeah.
Is that where you're at? I mean,
that's where I'm at. Yeah.
What is your writing lifestyle like?
Basically, I do a lot of YouTube. I do a lot of stay-at-home dad stuff. I do a lot of
How many kids do you have?
I only have one, but he has special needs. So
okay.
And, you know, I do get to write, but only maybe on the weekends, maybe at night before I go to bed. Not nearly as much as I want to. I want to be writing every day. But I can't. But
Well, you know, can and again, I apologize. I'm an interrupter. I'm sorry.
no, it's fine. It's fine.
But so, do you remember this guy, Ron Bass? He wrote Rain Man.
Yeah.
He used to be a lawyer, right? And then he became a screenwriter. And what he would do is he would get up at 4 a.m. and he would write from 4 to 7. Nobody bothered him, and he'd get a lot done. At 7 o'clock, he would get the kids to school. He'd come back, and then he's got all his phone calls because he's a producer, writer, and it's hard to get back to being into I call writing conscious dreaming, to get back to that state when you're fielding phone calls. And then in the afternoon, he'd take his lunch. His lunches, his power lunches. He'd have more meetings and afternoon phone calls. He'd have dinner, and then he'd go to bed about 9 or 10. He'd spend time with his wife. But he structured his day that no matter what, nobody would interfere with 4 a.m. till 7. And I actually would have done the 10 p.m. to midnight because I think it's more glamorous writing late night.
Yeah, that's more my style.
But but if you can find, and I've told people, I never have the discipline to write. If you just write an hour a day, and even in that hour, if you don't even write anything, or if you only rewrite a sentence or write one sentence, but the fact is you glue yourself, you don't give yourself an excuse, you will get the work done. And the more you put down on paper, the hardest thing is the breaking the beginning, the getting something down. I love actually the first draft can be exciting, but I try to write as fast as I can because I want to outright my self-doubt. Because if I don't finish it fast enough, I'm going to go, this kind of sucks. I'm not going to finish it. So I write so fast so I don't talk myself out. But that's when you go, well, there's something here that's not bad. And then when you start polishing, and that's when you could spend a whole afternoon on one paragraph. But even though it's a screenplay, it paints a better picture than what was before. There's a pleasure to it,
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Yeah. But I sympathize. I went through a period of time. I have twin girls and my son. At one point, we had 3 kids under 4, and I called it baby jail. And it is exhausting being a parent. But it seems like it's
getting easier. He's getting older. He's a teenager now, so it is getting a lot easier.
What you need to do is find a way that you write, even if it's an hour or a half hour a day, that's just for you, at least 6 days a week. That would be nice. Just have to listen. And think about that guy, Ron Bass. I mean, that's what he did. But he also, I have to tell you though, he also got so successful that he actually had a team of 6 sub-writers that he would say, give me ideas for this scene. Where would be an interesting location? Oh, it's a lawyer scene, but it's a lawyer that's in custody rights. Find some interesting stories about custody rights. And then they would come and pitch him in the afternoon. He goes, oh, I like that idea, I like that idea. So when he was at night, he was already fed ideas, but he was smart because he found a way to take writing, which is personalized, but he made it more like a General Motors production line to speed it up. He had enough money to pay people to keep him, to speed the process up and to give him ideas. And sometimes these people would write scenes for him. He would then rewrite it, and he was paying them a fuckload of money to do it. And it made him feel like he wasn't alone in the writing process, but at the same time, nobody was telling him what to do. I mean, I think that would be pretty fun, except, I'm the type of person that I'm always like, I was talking in the Knicks. I just like these really weird, strange but true stories. LBJ, when he was president, would take meetings while he was sitting on the pot. Right? I think that's really funny, and it's totally true. Right? I found this thing again. Kennedy had, when he was young, these back problems, and he would actually wear this corset. Right? And I have this really funny scene in Knicks where you see the close-up of JFK before he was president. He's kissing this girl, and then they part, and the girl goes, let's get rid of this cumbersome corset, right? And you think she's going to take off her corset, right? But then you cut back, and you see it's Kennedy wearing the corset, right? But then people later postulated why didn't Kennedy duck after the first shot? He's still a sitting target. because he was wearing his corset and he
Corset.
couldn't bend
Yeah.
down. And
I
so
see.
in my next thing, in the middle of explaining how he got shot, I show the first shot, and then I do, when the second shot is coming, I have him in his suit, but then I do this dissolve where you see, and Nixon is explaining, well, he couldn't duck because he had his corset, so he's getting shot at while he's wearing his corset, which is sort of absurd and funny, and maybe some people is too dark and making fun of this terrible thing in America. But at the same time, it makes a point is, there were other reasons why. I mean, if he didn't have this problem, maybe he would have survived, right? And then,
Right.
But I think that's funny. But I also like doing the research on, all these little idiosyncratic things about these people. That's what I like. But I don't know if I could hire. They would have to work with me for a long time to know the stuff that I like that are goodies. When, like when I'm doing research, unless I need to get like dates on specific events, I'm always scanning my research material to see if there's some funny anecdote of, right, that actually is something. They say fact is stranger than fiction. That's what I'm always scanning my research for, because that's
Right.
what I love. So what can you do? I mean, it's not really quirky, but I went back. I do think a hero with an old-fashioned gun and a blaster together is kind of really fun. And more quirky than just,
and that you can use that to make those like inventive action scenes where he's shooting the water and then
it's
electrifying.
really,
I mean,
it becomes like
that's really cool.
key in how they succeed,
Yeah.
Plus it's fun,
It's good stuff.
Yeah. So
anyway, that is why I definitely support Blast 'em Up, and I want people to go to the Kickstarter. I want them to show some kind of support if they can. And the link will be in the description, and I'll, after this is over, I'll pin a comment or something. I'll make sure that link gets out there. And yeah, check it out.
Yeah, and as I said, if you can't afford to support it, I still, if you just want to say, hey, I loved you on the show, that keeps me going. And, and I would love for you to follow the progress anyway, because that's really fun. And you can also go to blastemup.com. It has that has some stuff on there too. But yeah, if you could go to the Kickstarter, that would be really fantastic. Blast 'em Up, the Kickstarter.
Yeah.
So
this has been a blast. And before we go, I'm going to show the trailer one last, like the actual
fantastic.
Trailer. Yeah. And that'll be it. So, sorry if I didn't.
Thank you very much. I am in your debt. And again, please, for the
I have
rest
got
of
to
your
talk to you
life
some more and
up
pick your
here,
brain some more.
I would love to come back on anytime. But please, it makes me feel good when I can give back to people that have helped me. I don't want to just say that. When somebody gives me an opportunity to give back, it helps me feel like it wasn't just something I said. I really genuinely want to give back because it's such a hard business. And when somebody is so kind and supportive, and it means a lot. So please, if we could do something, if I could do something to help you,
I'm definitely hitting you up about that cover idea.
You know what? Let's definitely do that. Count on that. And that's actually a fun project for me.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and play the trailer, and then I'm going to go. So it's been great talking to you. Yeah, go ahead and say your goodbyes.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Eric. This has been a lot of fun. I look forward to seeing you again.
Yeah. We'll talk again. This has been great. I got to hit the button, so now we got to be awkward for a second,
I've been thinking. I'm doing good. It's just good business. Sorry. Of all the things that think these days. Everything.
What a way to make a living.
Wait, gets worse.
You're you.